Happening, y'all? Welcome inside the Fantasy Stock Exchange. Danny and Bush coming at you today with a way too early 2023 fantasy football mock draft. You guys know us. We're degenerates. The fantasy football season almost ended last night, and we'd be remiss to say thoughts and prayers for Damar Hamlin. Hope he makes a speedy recovery and all that stuff considered. But we are, still talking fantasy football here. We're projecting how the first two rounds of 2023 drafts will go based on our opinion, based on what we know now. Something to reflect back maybe in August, in a couple months from now, compare, reason things changed and all that kind of stuff. So hopefully you guys enjoy. More of like a fun exercise, not necessarily something too, tangible for like advice, but there is, way too early drafts going on over on Underdog if you want to take some of these into action. But Danny, how you doing?
Doing well. And yeah, we just basically have wrapped up the entirety of the 2022 fantasy football season. A lot of you guys, have competed throughout, whether you were eliminated early, whether you made the playoffs. No matter what, it's never too early, however, to project forward. And we've had a lot of interesting cases this year of players working their way into these top two rounds, players falling out of these top two rounds. So projecting forward now, once we have that full information at hand and we're not absorbed by some narratives going into the offseason, might honestly project, relatively safer than if we're doing this in August. Because realistically, sometimes we're building these narratives for players. We're building these players for, these takes that ultimately we lose sight on what exactly happened the previous year.
Yeah, exactly. I think maybe a player like Stephon Diggs might have been an example of that because, we built this narrative that he was like Jarvis Landry 2.0 in 2021, and then he eventually just ended up being the number one for Josh Allen, like we probably should have expected going in to the year. So before we get into it, as always, got to hit the intro. Okay, so we're going to start it off. Danny's going to be drafting from the odds. I'm going to be drafting from the evens. So, Danny, you have the 101. Who are you taking?
Yeah, I mean, this is a no-brainer 101. This is a guy that was in the top 4 of our rankings last year, and he just took that superstar ascendant that we expected him to. It's going to be Justin Jefferson, wide receiver of the Minnesota Vikings, coming off a legendary third season in the NFL, still only 23 years old. He's the best wide receiver in football, in my opinion, in your opinion, and a lot of people's opinion. We're talking about a guy who commanded 179 targets on a 30% target share this season, en route to 22.6 PPR points per game, which is quite literally a top 10 PPR point per game wide receiver season of all time. 9 games over 25 fantasy points. I think he should be the consensus 101.
Yeah, and we're doing this, of course, from a PPR perspective. If we were doing a standard draft, I'm sure things would change, but me and you only play pretty much exclusively in PPR or sometimes half PPR leagues. So Justin Jefferson, yeah, definitely, I would say probably the safest pick in fantasy drafts, which would probably lead people to take him 101, given that, 101s haven't worked out the past couple of years, like Jonathan Taylor this past year, Christian McCaffrey in years past, etc. So I could see Jefferson being the 101 simply for that fact that he's going to be probably one of the easiest projections we're going to have. 102 for me is Christian McCaffrey, running back from the San Francisco 49ers, 23 PPR points per game since joining the 49ers, at least 6 targets in every game except for 2. Quarterback situation is probably going to be a question mark going into next year because we have Trey Lance coming off of the injury. Brock Purdy has played well. What does that mean exactly? If Trey Lance, doesn't play well for the first couple games of the season, our fans, the coaches, whatever, are going to be chanting Brock Purdy's name if he has, let's say, 2 playoff games that he wins this year. Is he just going to be the backup quarterback and that'll be that? Or is Trey Lance going to, reassume the starting position? So a lot of question marks at quarterback as of right now. But what we do know is you have a talent like Christian McCaffrey, the receiving ability of a guy like Christian McCaffrey. We've seen it in action in this offense already. In a scheme like this, I'd take him probably over Jefferson if I had to decide right now, knowing what I know. But given the uncertainty with the QB situation, I understand probably going a guy like Jefferson first.
Yeah, I definitely do think these are the top 2 names entering next year's fold. I just have a little bit more questions when it comes to McCaffrey. You mentioned the quarterback situation. What exactly is going to happen in the playoffs once Elijah Mitchell's healthy? Some concerns that I just simply don't have with Jefferson. So that was ultimately the tiebreaker. However, if you want to go at running back, McCaffrey's getting a workload. He's insulated to a great offense. And from a receiving ability, from a rushing ability, from a scoring ability, he is the clear-cut primo of fantasy football running backs.
Yeah, and Mitchell will probably be a pass next year because we know, he's a good running back. He's probably going to be a target of mine in drafts. If he's going to be like an 8th, 9th, 10th round running back or something in next year's, redraft leagues, I'm sure he's going to be a big time 0 RB target for a lot of people as well. So 103, we can move on to that pick. Another LSU wide receiver coming off the board.
Yeah, I'm getting Justin Jefferson's college teammate with the gritty man himself, the other gritty man himself, Jamar Chase of the Cincinnati Bengals, 29% target share this year when healthy, and 20 PPR points per game when healthy this year. We know the macro peripherals. He's attached to Joe Burrow. He's attached to an elite offense. We know that there's elite big play upside here. And of course, he's a young ascending player, only 22 years old. He and Justin Jefferson are going to be the staples of the wide receiver position in the NFL for years to come. And as a result, I just would not take anybody else here over Jamar Chase.
Yeah, again, it's just a very easy projection. You don't have any kind of age concerns or are they going to slow down concerns, which we might have here in a second for some of these wide receivers. But with Chase, again, elite quarterback, elite player, elite target share, elite pretty much across the board. So 103, no questions asked there. 104, Stephon Diggs, wide receiver of the Buffalo Bills. Another easy projection, assuming he's not that old yet, right? He's still under 30, high target, high touchdown upside, plays with an elite quarterback. He's an elite wide receiver talent. He's an elite separator himself. A guy that's commanding, a 30+% type of target share from Josh Allen is always going to be highly valued in fantasy. Probably a guy that was very undervalued this year in drafts. If you guys were able to snag him at, 112, sometimes in the second round in some people's drafts. So Stephon Diggs to me at 104. Again, the reaction I would imagine for most people will be, we need to take these elite wide receivers higher, given what we saw this year with a lot of the running back talent. Maybe that'll change if you guys are in more of a home league setting. Maybe everybody will just revert back to their typical we overvalue running back stance. But I'd imagine sharp drafts, sharp ADP like Underdog and other sites will probably have these wide receivers climbing up the board a little bit more.
Yeah, no, I agree. Stephon Diggs, well worth a top 5 pick in my opinion. He's been an absolute stud this year. So moving off of Stephon Diggs, we actually go to another receiver in his division, and one that was one of the biggest shocks this year. Genuinely, we knew this guy was an elite talent, but we did think that leaving the situation he was at hand, leaving the best quarterback in football, his numbers would take a hit as a result. But Tyreek Hill on the Miami Dolphins has been an absolute league winner to the word. 165 targets, 33+% target share this year in his first year as a Dolphin. You're matching that elite high volume, again, a 33+% target share with high efficiency, over 10 yards per target this year, playing in that McDaniel scheme, playing with Tua Tagovailoa. We know this is a high octane offense, and we know that it's here to stay with the way McDaniel has handled himself his first year as a head coach. The only question marks I have here are about Tua's concussion history. It is a little bit of concern. He suffered 3 concussions this year. Is he ever going to really be the same? Is he ever really going to come back at full capacity? However, if all of that is cleared up, if all those concerns are levied by the time this, August comes and you guys have to make these decisions for your fantasy team, I wouldn't be shocked if he was a consensus 103 given his play this year. He's averaging over 21 PPR points per game.
Yeah, I mean, and prior, I'm sure this is, we're going to get into the dangers of like limited samples or whatever, but if you take games where Tua Tagovailoa started and finished the entire game, I'm sure Tyreek Hill would have been on a historic pace of, nearly 2,000, probably over 2,000 receiving yards. So that production, that high-end weekly ceiling alone is enough for you to be able to take a guy like Tyreek Hill first, top 3 overall in general. And the one thing that we're going to have to talk about pretty much all offseason is, we have the same robust RB stands that will always say, an elite running back at his ceiling is better than an elite wide receiver at his ceiling. And it is true. It is definitely more likely to happen if you have a legendary season from a running back that he can single-handedly carry you than a wide receiver. But at the same time, the production that you get out of a wide receiver one, true wide receiver one, like Tyreek Hill, Justin Jefferson, and Jamar Chase, Stephon Diggs, some of these guys, is the value over replacement is almost equally similar for those guys, if not more, than guys that you're going to get, in the RB2 range, potentially in the 8th, 9th, 10th round of your drafts. And we saw that this year. We had plenty of hits from Ramondre Stevenson, Jamal Williams, and all those type of dudes. So definitely, Kenneth Walker, a lot of guys like that. So going to be an interesting discussion yet again this year, what to do with the running back position as we had coming into the year. And these guys are another year older for the most part, most of these dudes. So the 106 for me is a bit of an older wide receiver. He'll be 30 next year. Cooper Kupp of the Los Angeles Rams. They were an exploding mess in 2022. Pretty much everything went wrong for them. QB, star wide receivers, Aaron Donald, everybody getting injured. Coaches reportedly potentially retiring. So this is kind of tentative. If Sean McVay is gone, this would obviously shake things up. Cooper Kupp potentially, if McVay and Donald retire, could potentially be on the trade block for the Los Angeles Rams. But he still commanded 31% of the Rams' targets this year. Top 10 in yards per route run. Uber consistent when he was on the field. Only one game of less than 7 receptions and 80+ receiving yards. That is rare production. He probably would have had yet another, 20+ PPR point per game season if he and Matthew Stafford, at the very least, were able to stay healthy for the rest of the year. Maybe even just him with Baker Mayfield would have been enough. So Cooper Kupp, Still an elite wide receiver. Definitely could probably go lower than this, I would imagine, if there's some concerns creeping in. But if we get Matthew Stafford, Sean McVay, and Cooper Kupp back together in 2023, I have no problem taking this guy with a top 6 pick.
Yeah, no, I fully agree. I mean, he was on pace to quite literally be there right at the end, neck for neck with Justin Jefferson this year. Their point per game averages are super, super similar. We know he's an elite player. We know he gets elite volume. We know that if Matthew Stafford is healthy, he does have E plus at quarterback. The only question here, of course, would be that age coming off the injury, how exactly things are going to roll. But realistically, I mean, I'm trusting talent to win over here, and I'm trusting that with a full offseason, he's going to be back to the Cooper Kupp we know of old, which as a result, if he is that Cooper Kupp, 106 is getting him at a point blank steal.
Yeah, exactly. So we're going to see some running backs come off the board here in a second.
Yeah.
You got one here at 107.
Yeah, and it's going to be Austin Eckler of the Los Angeles Chargers, transitioning from the Rams to the Chargers, another Los Angeles team here. But when it comes to Eckler, 123 targets this year and 18 touchdowns, en route to being the fantasy running back 1 overall, over 22.7 PPR points per game this season. We know the peripherals at hand here. He's an elite receiving talent. He's tethered to an elite quarterback and a great offense with the Los Angeles Chargers. The only reason why he would be the running back 2 off the board as opposed to a guy like Christian McCaffrey is that he's not that true workhorse. He's not going to average 22, 23 touches per game, 22, 23 opportunities per game like Christian McCaffrey would. However, he gets extremely valuable opportunities in a very good offense, which as a result makes him my clear-cut running back 2 going into next year.
Yeah, the other thing with Eckler, too, is I think a lot of these outlooks, we can say, oh, that might regress a little bit. This might not be repeatable. Austin Eckler, like, there was a lot that went wrong with the Chargers this year. So the fact that he was still able to be such an elite option, despite Keenan Allen missing a bunch of games, despite Mike Williams missing a bunch of games, Justin Herbert himself was dealing with a rib injury at one point. Rashawn Slater, their left tackle, has been out pretty much the entire season. So it's not like this was a squeaky clean season out of the Los Angeles Chargers and everything went right for them en route to this RB1 finish for Austin Eckler. There's still, generally speaking, some meat left on the bone, assuming that he's going to be the same player next year. And again, he's another year older, so that presents some risk. But he doesn't have a ton of touches under his belt. He's not some grinder running up the middle 20 times a game type of running back to begin with. So definitely, I'm more likely to take a guy like Austin Eckler in the first round at running back than I would be maybe one of these other 2017 running back draft class guys that gets more dirty carries like a Dalvin Cook, for example. So moving on to the next running back off the board, we have Bijan Robinson, who's a rookie running back, doesn't have an NFL team yet, running back from the Texas Longhorns, who will be probably a top 15, top 20 pick lock in the first round of the NFL draft this year. The guy is reportedly being valued similar to the way that Saquon Barkley was being valued by NFL teams, rightfully so. He's going to test very well. He has very high level production. He probably, if the Texas Longhorns would have been, a college football type of playoff team, if he had gotten a little bit more work, could have been a Heisman Trophy winner this year. I think he's going to go top 15 in the NFL draft. He's probably a top 3 player in the draft class period, but because he plays running back, he'll slide down the board a little bit. There's NFL teams that drafted Najee Harris and Travis Etienne in the first round just 2 years ago, and they're not nearly the prospects that Bijan Robinson was. So if you tell me that those guys are getting first round draft capital, Sony Michel's and, Rashad Penny's a couple of years ago as well, Bijan's going to go in the first round, hopefully to a team like the Philadelphia Eagles, if they move on from Miles Sanders, the Miami Dolphins, potentially if they want a workhorse running back there, potentially the Atlanta Falcons have been brought up as well. Anywhere where he can go and he can get volume, he's worth a first round pick, in my opinion.
Yeah, no, I absolutely agree with you with Bijan Robinson. This might sound like a hot take because a lot of people will like, well, we don't know where he's going to play yet. We still got other running backs, other older running backs that probably should go ahead of him. A lot of people are going to argue that. However, I am genuine when I say this. Bijan Robinson is closer to being my running back 1 overall than he is falling out of the first round. And I've seen a lot of people saying, oh, he's going to be a second or third round pick. There is no shot come August, given the hype, given the draft capital we expect, given the potential landing spot. Again, a lot of the running back needy teams are very good teams entering next year. Philadelphia, maybe Dallas, it were maybe Baltimore. We're getting some very, very good landing spots for this running back. And if he lands in the right situation, he can break fantasy football. So that is a first round pick, in my opinion. Love Bijan Robinson transitioning. A player that did break fantasy football this year, given the scarcity at his position, given the advantage he holds to his peers, a near 20 PPR point per game season from this guy. Travis Kelce is ageless. Travis Kelce is Mr. Timeless. He's been a top 2 PPR tight end each and every year since 2016. He's the model of consistency, and we know the peripherals are dang good to boot. I mean, he's attached to the best quarterback in football on an elite offense, 150 plus target, 10 plus touchdown upside from the most scarce position, like I mentioned. You could argue for him being a top 5 pick, but I do think that there's a bit more of a heightened concern with him compared to some of the other guys, being that he's going to be 34 entering the season. But regardless, as long as he's healthy, as long as he's a Chief, he will be the number 1 ranked tight end in fantasy, and a huge advantage to the field in your fantasy football drafts.
Yeah, and I kind of brought up this point with Derrick Henry last offseason that, like, sometimes Hall of Fame caliber talents have different rules than, like, the rest of players. And I'm starting to think that Travis Kelce might be just that guy. Like, he's potentially, I mean, people have brought him up as potentially the best receiving tight end of all time. I think that's a little exaggerated, but we're talking about a guy that's probably top 5, top 10 at the very least receiving tight ends of all time. So, yeah,
top
like
3.
He's going to be 34 years old next year, but he still has Patrick Mahomes throwing him the football. And it's not like he actually showed any signs of decline this year. So, yeah, 109, potentially even higher than that. Yeah. Definitely warranted for that pick there. 110, we can move on to the next pick here. Saquon Barkley, running back, currently of the New York Giants. I think the Giants are going to at least extend a multi-year extension to Saquon Barkley. Whether he takes it or not is obviously up for debate. I think even if he doesn't take a multi-year extension from the Giants, I think at the very least he's probably franchise tagged by them. I don't think he's just going to openly hit the market and go sign with a new team. I highly doubt that the Giants would allow something like that to happen. So I think what we're probably going to get is Daniel Jones on the franchise tag, Saquon Barkley on a 2 or 3 year deal. And I think those guys are both back in New York, and we're talking about a top 5 running back this year, averaging about 18 PPR points per game with 0 threats on the outside, nobody to speak of, a rookie right tackle. Again, another Austin Eckler situation, a lot of meat left on the bone. Their offensive line took major steps this year. They could take even more steps going in to 2023. And if Daniel Jones continues to play well, maybe he has like a breakout season in 2023. If they add, maybe potentially some actual wide receivers, not Kenny Golladay and Kadarius Toney, who they went in with this season, if they draft a first-round wide receiver and maybe sign a free agent or something like that, we could be talking about Saquon Barkley playing on a top 15, top 10 offense for the first time in his career, which has never really happened thus far. His first season in the NFL was the best offense he ever played for, and I believe they were like 18th in points per game with Eli Manning. So with Saquon, he makes the offense better, as we saw this year with him staying healthy. The offense was much better, even despite starting Isaiah Hodgins, Richie James, and Darius Slayton like half the year, if not more.
Yeah, no, I agree. He would be probably the next running back off the board for me. Yeah, as long as he stays in that situation, as long as potentially they add some receivers on the outside. We know that this is a team that made the playoffs this year in their first year under Brian Daboll. Only signs going up. So I do agree that Saquon Barkley would be the next running back off the board. My next pick is going to go to the wide receiver position because, as you guys know, at FSC over here, we hate running backs. And my next wide receiver off the board plays for the team that's hanging up behind me. It's going to be CeeDee Lamb of the Dallas Cowboys. 149 targets this year, 28% target share, and pacing a career high in terms of yards and touchdowns with 1307 and 8 respectively. On the season as a whole, he's averaging 17.8 PPR points per game, which would rank as the wide receiver 8. However, when you condense that to the games that Prescott has played since week 7, where they've been the best offense in football, 35.1 points per game for the Cowboys offense, since Dak's return, 89 targets, 69 receptions, 898 receiving yards, and 6 touchdowns in those 10 games, which if you equate it to a PPR point per game, would be 19.7 PPR points per game, which across a full season would be the wide receiver 5 after only Justin Jefferson, Cooper Kupp, Jamar Chase, and Tyreek Hill. He's getting elite volume. He's an elite talent. That's an elite offense attached to an elite quarterback with Dak Prescott. I think he is a clear first-round fantasy football pick. He's a similar cost to what he was last year. Only last year, we were projecting him to become this guy. This year, we have the data. We have the facts that he can be a suitable stud wide receiver 1. So if I'm going to get him at the same cost as last year, sign me the hell up.
Yeah, and I think you can make the argument he should have gone at like 107, 108 for sure. There's going to be probably 7 or 8 pass catchers minimum, I would say, in the first round of fantasy drafts, at least in our opinion. Again, maybe in your home leagues, that's not how it plays out. In that case, just obviously take the value as it falls. But CeeDee Lamb, again, you can make the argument he should have belonged over Kelce, over Barkley, and maybe over Bijan as well. So, yeah, I don't mind that pick. The next player I have off the board is also a wide receiver in the NFC East. A.J. Brown of the Philadelphia Eagles, top 5 wide receiver this year in his first season with Jalen Hurts. Next year represents, again, another safe option, a super talented dude, a part of a great offense with Jalen Hurts leading the charge. You wonder if the magic of the Eagles season wears off next year. Do they have like a little bit of, maybe they win the Super Bowl this year and they have like a Super Bowl hangover? But again, that stuff is all kind of conjecture. We don't actually have any real proof to say they would regress. Yeah. It's a narrative, and it's definitely something that, looking back after 2023, we could say, oh yeah, that was just a magical season, but we can't really say going into the year that, it's not a reason or it's a reason to fade AJ Brown for some reason. So we don't really have any reason to think otherwise. I think he's just a very safe projection. It's a great wide receiver, great quarterback, great offense. It's not that hard.
He's an alpha stud talent and a great offense with a great quarterback. It's pretty simple in terms of his projection. I will say him, Lamb, and the next receiver we're about to talk about, I do think are in that mini tier after the top guys. Extremely valuable projections for them. Extremely valuable this season. And I mean, AJ Brown is fucking stud. Like, he could take any ball to the house. He's commanding elite volume, 30% target share. Like, yeah, I fully agree. He should be well worth this first round pick. Transitioning off of AJ Brown, I go to a different Brown, one that actually plays for the Detroit Lions with Amon-Ra St. Brown, 19.2 PPR points per game in games he's played 50+% of the snaps this year, en route to 130 targets and 10 targets per game in that stretch of games, including 1,090 receiving yards and 6 receiving touchdowns. It's pretty simple to me. He is the clear alpha target earner on this Detroit offense that has really proven many people wrong. Nobody expected them to be one of the best offenses in the league. Everybody's like, oh, it's Dan Campbell. They're going to run the ball. They're going to have a slow pace. They're going to win on defense. They have been one of the highest flying offenses in the entire NFL this year. Kudos to Jared Goff for actually being a very valuable quarterback, especially for Amon-Ra St. Brown's perspective. He's going to be a player that I feel like is going to be driven down due to narrative. We're going to hear, narratives this offseason. Jameson Williams going to take over his wide receiver 1 role. Do you expect Jared Goff to continue what he did last year again this year? All these narratives, I feel like, is going to make him like a back-end second-round pick. But make no mistake about it. Don't fall for this trap. This is a clear top 15 player, in my opinion, for next year, and has a legitimate 20+ PPR point per game range of outcome.
Yeah, I mean, he pretty much did it as a second-year player this year. And these last two guys that we're talking about, I feel good to say we were on the very much the right side of A.J. Brown and Amon-Ra St. Brown, two of my highest exposed players across every type of format last year, because it was just so clear and obvious. People want a narrative base. They were the victims of target competition, right? But when you're the clear alpha earner of your team, it really doesn't matter. And Jameson Williams poses some threat because he's a good receiver, but at the same time, he hasn't shown us anything yet to say that he's even going to sniff Amon-Ra St. Brown's target share. Jameson Williams has to prove it first. It's more along the lines of what we saw with Marquise Brown and Rashad Bateman before Marquise Brown got traded away from Baltimore. We were like, oh, is Rashad Bateman going to eat into his target share? It's like, not really. He has to earn that stuff. Marquise Brown has already done it, and eventually he got traded and it didn't matter. But at the same time, we definitely have that same kind of narrative setting up for Jameson Williams and Amon-Ra St. Brown. 202 for me is Jonathan Taylor from the Indianapolis Colts, the 101 from 2022. The difference between Jonathan Taylor in 2021 and 2022 is pretty simple to me. JT himself was banged up. Obviously, that contributed. But the quarterback play was awful and the offensive line regressed heavily. Therefore, the offense wasn't that good. And Jonathan Taylor, as good as he is, and as good as he was his rookie season when he was a top 12 running back, as good as he was as a second-year player when he was the RB1, he is more so dependent on not landing spot, but like guys around him to make the offense better, because he's a carry-related running back. He's not like Austin Eckler where things can go wrong around him. And because he gets so many targets, he's just going to be great. We're probably setting up for a rookie quarterback, bridge quarterback combo in Indianapolis next year, whether that's, CJ Stroud and let's say Mitch Trubisky or something to start the year. Or we just get a rookie starting from the very beginning. And that's going to pose some issues with Jonathan Taylor, because not often do we see rookie quarterbacks come in and just be the greatest quarterback in the league and do what Justin Herbert did, for example, in 2020. The way he hits is A, he needs to be healthy and efficient as the great running back he is, and B, he needs a solid offense around him so he can get those nearly 100 red zone touches that led him to be the RB1 in 2021. Because this year, that was the difference between him and his 2021 season, is the red zone touches, the touchdown opportunities.
Yeah, no, I fully agree with you, Jonathan Taylor. And I mean, despite all that, I mean, he wasn't, this complete train wreck. Again, if you're taking him 101, you're very, very upset. I get that. But I mean, when he was healthy, we did see at the end of the season, 24.3 PPR points, 16.4, 18.8, 13.3 in a 4-game stretch prior to the bye week, prior to that Minnesota game where he did get hurt. So we did see that he could be an RB1 at the complete baseline, at the complete floor. And as you said, if he adds a quarterback, if the offensive line plays better, if he stays healthy, if he gets that red zone workload like he got in 2021, this is a guy I have no problems projecting forward as a top 5 level running back.
Yeah, again, that's going to be, for us to sort out as fantasy analysts, but it's definitely something that we got to be aware of, because if the situation around him is decent, then he has the ability, because he's such a great running back, to be able to elevate that situation around him. And from a dynasty perspective, I think the overreaction's gone a little far on Jonathan Taylor. Yep. We were out on Jonathan Taylor last year at the price he was going at, but now it's almost swung in the other direction where people are out on Jonathan Taylor because, you know, he should prove that he's human and he can get injured, and the offense around him definitely poses some threats. So 203, where are you going?
203, I'm going with arguably, I mentioned Justin Jefferson. I mentioned some other guys. I mentioned some elite talents at the wide receiver position, but the one that's been the most productive over like the last 5 years is Davante Adams of the Las Vegas Raiders. Over 20 PPR points per game last year, over 170 targets in his first year as a Raider. We know that if all variables were put aside, this guy would be a first-round pick. He's an elite talent, demands elite volume. But the question is, what the hell are the Raiders going to do at quarterback this offseason? We know Derek Carr is going to be gone, benched for these next 2 games. Obviously, benched against the San Francisco 49ers, benched against the last game of the season against the Kansas City Chiefs. There's a big unknown in terms of who exactly is going to be Las Vegas's quarterback 1, which as a result is going to have Davante Adams falling to 203. I'm not really going to speculate on what could happen at their quarterback position, whether they go with Stidham, draft a guy, or potentially, you know, go for a Tom Brady in free agency. Who knows what the Raiders are going to do to address the position? But because there's an unknown factor right now, and because we have other elite receivers in fantasy football, I'm just going to fall to 203. But if you were to tell me come August that he's the 107, I wouldn't bat an eye.
Yeah, if Tom Brady's the QB in Las Vegas, if Aaron Rodgers is the QB in Las Vegas or something like that, we're not concerned at all. Or if, you know, Davante Adams himself gets traded as a result, we wouldn't be that concerned either. But there's just a lot of up in the air kind of speculation at the moment. I think he's a good buy in dynasty right now because the simple fact is that he's still an elite receiver and didn't regress one bit this year. So the uncertainty will give you a slight discount. I'm not typically the type of person to buy contending assets in January. Usually you save that for like younger pieces or whatever that don't have the ability to fall off a cliff in terms of value. But I think Davante Adams has already fallen off a decent amount. And as long, again, you'll get a bunch of buying windows just as the certainty factor starts to increase. If Tom Brady goes there, you got a selling window if you want to sell off Davante Adams. If you get him for, you know, a young receiver and a 2nd-round pick right now, and Tom Brady's his quarterback come, you know, March 15th or something, then Davante Adams is going to go back up to being multiple firsts that you need to get for him if you're a contending roster. So definitely makes sense there. It could be a lot higher. 204 for me is Travis Etienne, another guy that I honestly wouldn't be shocked if he was higher than this come the actual time that we're drafting in August. It's a 3rd-year running back who now has a year of starting under his belt. Didn't see the receiving workload that we wanted to see from him coming into the year. We thought maybe we got, you know, this year's DeAndre Swift. He's going to get like 100 targets or something like that. But regardless, he's playing for an ascending quarterback on an offense featuring Christian Kirk and Calvin Ridley so far. Could bring back Evan Ingram. Maybe they add another wide receiver in the draft, Quentin Johnston or something like that. Has been mocked to him a couple times. They are going to be everybody's favorite breakout offense in 2023, like not even remotely a question. It's like I already know that they're going to draw comparisons to the 2022 Eagles. Everybody's going to be very excited about Trevor Lawrence in fantasy. He'll probably be a top 10, maybe 8 quarterback off the board. Travis Etienne himself will be a huge beneficiary playing for such a great offense. So Etienne, 204, again, I wouldn't be shocked if he's a back-end first-round pick.
Yep. No, I would completely agree with this. Travis Etienne, really good talent. You mentioned the ascending offense. They've already proven like the last, 5-6 weeks that they are trending in the right direction. Probably going to win the division this year, potentially contend for, 11, 12 plus wins next year, especially with Calvin Ridley in the fold. I'm all aboard this Jaguars offense, and Travis Etienne, as a result, is going to have a ton of scoring opportunity, getting a ton of elite volume this year. No problems with him being a high to mid 2nd-round pick, potentially even a back-end first come August.
Yeah, exactly.
Next player I'm going to be talking about is pretty much a similar archetype to that of Travis Etienne, a big explosive runner, going to be getting some elite volume in a situation. The only thing there is, you can argue that the Jacksonville Jaguars offense is ascending, whereas, the Seattle Seahawks, as much as I like this offense, realistically doesn't have the ceiling of a Trevor Lawrence-led Jaguars. It's going to be Kenneth Walker of the Seattle Seahawks. He entered this year in a committee with Rashad Penny, but once Penny got hurt in week 5, it was Walker's time to shine. Between week 6 and 12 and 5 and 17, Walker did get hurt in week 13 and missed the week 14 game as a result. Basically, since week 6 on, when he's been healthy, he's averaged 17.5 PPR points per game and 22 opportunities per game as a rookie running back. Entering next year as a sophomore, we know that he's tied to a very solid offense. Again, not an elite projection offense like maybe the Jaguars will be, but he gets amazing volume, is a big play threat anytime he touches the football. I think he's proven a lot of people wrong in terms of his 3-down capability, in terms of his ability to work on what everybody deemed a bad situation, which actually resulted in a good situation given the play of Geno Smith with Kenneth Walker. I think he's proven all he has to be a mid-2nd-round pick come next year.
Yeah, and there's some uncertainty in this situation
Yep.
too, because Gino's a free agent. We don't know if he's going to get the tag, if he's going to get an extension. I would have said, a couple of weeks ago, he's a lock to get an extension, but he's regressed a little bit since then. So maybe it's possible that they franchise tag him. We don't really know what's going to happen quite yet for Geno Smith and Kenneth Walker in the QB situation. But if we have Geno back with Kenneth Walker, DK Metcalf, and Tyler Lockett, I think you got to draft the guy in the second round, knowing what we know about what happened this year. So moving on to the next player we have here is Josh Allen. And the late round quarterback mantra simply doesn't apply to the next quarterbacks that we're going to talk about. It definitely applies to, guys like Drew Brees, who it was created for a couple of years ago, way back when we provided you, when those guys provided you with nothing on the ground. But when you're getting at least 700 yards and 7 to 10 rushing touchdowns from a guy like Josh Allen out of a quarterback that is also capable of putting up a 50 touchdown passing season and 5,000 yards, it provides an advantage unlike any other at any other position outside of maybe Travis Kelce at tight end. These guys like Josh Allen are putting up 25 plus PPR point per game ceilings, if not higher, because you have the potential for like a 30 point per game season out of these type of dudes, given what they can do on the ground and through the air. They have the ability to put up 35, 40, 50 points on any given week as well. So that, long-term throughout the season production that you're getting out of a guy like Josh Allen, plus the weekly bonus that you get for having that one player in your lineup that can put up nearly 100 points by himself, is definitely worth a 206 in my opinion.
Yeah, it's finally time that the fantasy community sharpens up to the value of an elite quarterback. I feel like, again, everybody, abided by, we can't take our quarterbacks early. We can't take your quarterbacks early. They don't provide, a positional edge. They don't, they go really, really deep. Now we got guys that can provide that positional edge. We're talking about Josh Allen over a 25 PPR point per game score. The next guy I'm going to be talking about, another guy we're going to be talking about in the second round. If you guys want elite advantage at the quarterback position, you need to draft them early now. Evidenced by this year, the top quarterbacks have been legitimate game changers, have been legitimate league winners. So I fully agree. And the next guy I'm going to be talking about feels exactly like you mentioned with Josh Allen, with Jalen Hurts of the Philadelphia Eagles. Mentioned his teammate A.J. Brown earlier in the video, but when it comes to Jalen Hurts, 26.7 points per game this year, stemming from elite goal line rushing usage. We're talking about a guy, a quarterback with 13 rushing touchdowns. He's got over 700 rushing yards and 13 rushing touchdowns. He's basically as if Jamal Williams also threw the ball. Like, that's the level of advantage he's giving you at the quarterback position. You're getting basically a near Jamal Williams, who's the RB15 in PPR right now, added to his already incredible passing ability. He's been a one-man wrecking crew. He's tied to a fantastic situation in Philadelphia entering next year, given the coaching, given the weapons at hand, given the line he has up front. He's lived up to all the expectations we possibly put on his plate in 2022. He became an MVP candidate, and now as a result, I think he has to be a deserved top 24 pick.
Yeah, exactly. And they might even add, if they add Bijan Robinson to this situation, we've never seen a talent like that with a running talent like think about like the Michael Vick days. Did he ever have a running back like that? Ever?
No.
Right. And you've never seen him even with the passing weapons that Jalen Hurts has, which is why we're seeing such a special season out of Jalen Hurts. And he no doubt would have been the MVP had he not gotten injured, in my opinion. So yeah, Jalen Hurts at 207 makes a lot of sense. We'll rattle off some third-year wide receivers here with Jalen Waddle, or I guess third and fourth-year wide receivers going into next year. Jalen Waddle of the Miami Dolphins. The Dolphins will be interesting going into 2022 because this is like the efficiency versus volume debate with Jalen Waddle, and I think it's going to hurt his stock going into next year. And I honestly don't think he'll even go this high as a result, but I think he probably should, because if you get Tua Tagovailoa, healthy and playing like he did, one of the most efficient quarterbacks in the NFL when he was on the field this year, Waddle had the 28th highest target share. So that's going to concern people. It was only 22.5%, but he has the big play upside. He has the ability to make the most of his targets. And even though he only had like 3 games with more than 8 targets on the season, and he had 1 game with 19 targets that helped kind of aid that as well, he's still a guy that's going to benefit from Tyreek Hill being opposite him. It's still an offense schematically that presents a lot of difficulties for defenses, given the speed that's there, given the playmaking ability that Tua has to just get the ball to whoever is open, whoever is making plays that game. And Jalen Waddle is going to be a beneficiary of that. He's going to give you those spike weeks. And even though he's not the clean projection, 30% target share playing with a number 1 quarterback, he's still going to be very valuable in fantasy.
Yep, no, fully agree. He's got that Tyreek Hill-esque ability where any single given touch, he can take that house. We saw that against Green Bay in the first half before Tua suffered his concussion. We legitimately saw him take, a 10-yard slant route, a 10-yard into the fucking house. That's a level of elite talent. That's a level of elite dynamic ability he has. And not to mention, We're talking about a 22.5% target share. Yeah, you know, that doesn't compare to some of these other elite receivers, but also some of these other elite receivers doesn't have the movement ability that Jalen Waddle does.
Right. And he was efficient in college on limited targets. He's been efficient in the NFL on limited targets this year. He was a high target guy in 2021, his rookie season. So if anything ever happened to Tyreek Hill, he's got some inherent upside probably as well to get more targets. So we can move on to the 209, who also would have some inherent upside if the starter ahead of him went down.
Yeah, T. Higgins, wide receiver of the Cincinnati Bengals. Very similar macro perspective that I made for the case of Jamar Chase. You know, we know this is going to be an elite offense tied to Joe Burrow. Very concentrated target hierarchy between their two wide receivers. And a tweet from one of my buddies over there, Dynasty IM. He basically tweeted out that in games where T. Higgins has played 50+% of the snaps, he's posting a 23.4% target share, 2.21 yards per team pass attempt, 34.9% air yard share, and 17.9 fantasy points per game. 17.9 fantasy points per game gets him among the likes of AJ Brown, among the likes of CeeDee Lamb. He's been a legitimate wide receiver 7+ this year when he's been fully healthy. And we know, given the situation, that he's going to have that insulated value yet again.
Yeah, and this is another guy that could find himself at the end of the third round of drafts just because of some stupid fluke games where he was active and got 0 points. It's going to weigh down his, overall bottom line of his fantasy points per game. But we know what he is when he's healthy. He's, one of the best number 2 receivers in the league. And he's attached to an offense that can absolutely support 2 top 5, 2 top 8 wide receivers in fantasy. So yeah, T. Higgins could come in a big discount next year, as he did this year already. 210, Patrick Mahomes, the third quarterback of the video. Without Tyreek Hill, we expected him to regress a little bit. He did not. Mahomes provides such an advantage as a pure passer. He's probably going to win the MVP. He is currently like minus 850 to win it right now. And when you're a lock for 40+ passing touchdowns, 300 yards and a couple touchdowns on the ground, and 5,000 passing yards, it makes it hard for you to be faded in fantasy drafts next year. We don't like drafting for safety typically, but in the early rounds. But when it's coupled with a league-winning and week-winning performance ability like Patrick Mahomes has, it's really hard to say that, this guy's not just such an easy pick to make in the second round, at the end of the second round, where he's probably going to end up going. We actually don't know, given what we know about the landscape of the quarterback position in the past, is the market going to react positively to what we've seen from these quarterbacks this year and draft them at the tail end of the first round, early second round, like they probably should be going? Or are they going to go back to the same old late round quarterback mantra and let these guys go in the third, fourth, and fifth round like we saw this year? So we don't really know what that's going to play out like right now. But as of now, Patrick Mahomes needs to be considered at least in the second round.
Yeah, no, I fully agree that Patrick Mahomes, I do believe this top 3 is kind of like the top tier entering next year. Then you get into some of the mid-round guys with some upside, but realistically, like these 3 quarterbacks should be the top 3 quarterbacks for everybody's rankings going into next year. Transitioning off of Patrick Mahomes and obviously that elite quarterback advantage he gives, we go on to 211 with Ramondre Stevenson of the New England Patriots. This year, he's been a one-man wrecking crew since he fully took over that backfield from Damian Harris. He started in the NFL in targets amongst the running back position, top 5 target share at the running back position. We know that Damian Harris is going to be a free agent, but it's going to be a likely replacement with Kevin Harris or Pierre Strong. Like, I don't expect either of those two guys to take the type of role that Damian Harris has been in. Not to mention Ramondre Stevenson, of course, since week 3 has been a legitimate top 5 to 10 running back in fantasy football. Probably let you down the last couple of weeks, but don't let these last 2 weeks of sour taste, if you will, really counteract a phenomenal season from Ramondre Stevenson. Wouldn't be shocked if he found his way higher in these rankings, higher in this mock draft come August, once they really figure out the running back position. Once maybe, New England lets Damian Harris walk and doesn't replace him in the draft, I wouldn't be shocked if he was a top 15 pick.
Yeah, and if they add, let's say, Jordan Addison to their wide receiver core and actually give them some legitimate weapons on the outside, I think this offense is going to be one that I'm very high on in general, where I'm going to be taking shots on Ramondre. If Ramondre Stevenson, and he will likely probably fit into this like late second, early third round range regardless, I think. If he's going in this area and they have some true number 1 wide receiver to help take attention away from him, they have the same kind of infrastructure and offense. They fire fucking Matt Patricia and get Bill O'Brien or somebody to orchestrate the offense. I think that Ramondre Stevenson will be a great third year breakout running back potentially that has RB1 overall upside given the target share that we've seen from the guy. We know he can handle a big workload. He's a big dude. He'll be a young running back, so you don't have those age concerns as well. So it definitely makes a lot of sense there. Running back, another running back off the board, Josh Jacobs as the 212 closing out this video, currently of the Las Vegas Raiders. He narrowly cleared 20 plus PPR points per game this season with 20.1 in 2022. Uncertainty regarding his role with the team because he is a free agent. It sounds like he wants to go somewhere else by, what we've kind of heard about the Raiders situation and him specifically. But the Raiders may franchise tag him. We really don't know what they're going to do. If I was the Raiders, I would franchise tag him and try and trade him. But the guy was excellent this year, right? Workhorse usage, elite efficiency, top 10 across the board in juke rate, yards per catch, anything that you could look at. He was a very good running back this year on a situation that, again, like Austin Eckler, wasn't the greatest. It's not like the Raiders were this top 5 offense. Devontae Adams and him were pretty much the two-man show there. And Derek Carr didn't play his best football. So if they bring in Tom Brady and Josh Jacobs stays in Las Vegas on a franchise tag, we could be seeing a better situation even than what we saw with Jacobs this year. He could have more touchdowns, could have more big plays and stuff that we've seen. So definitely a guy that potentially could have gone higher than this, given what we know about what he did this year. But at the same time, we don't know what his role is going to be next year and even what team he's going to play for and who his quarterback is going to be. So a lot of question marks with Jacobs, but still a guy that's deserving of going in the top 2 rounds.
Yeah, no, I definitely do agree. As long as his situation isn't a complete dumpster fire, which it shouldn't be realistically, he proved this year that given the receiving ability, given the pure rushing volume that he gets, combined with efficiency this year, I think that's one of the more underrated stories, that he's been an historically inefficient runner in his first few years as a Las Vegas Raider. But this year we did see 4.98 yards per carry, 12 rushing touchdowns, was that true workhorse that everybody was hoping that he could become when they were drafting him in the 1-2 turn. As soon as everybody, lost faith in him potentially becoming that, he ends up becoming exactly what we thought he could be.
Yeah, and he slides outside like the top 5-6 rounds in some leagues because he was like your prototypical dead zone running back in some people's minds. And then he just eventually achieved a 20 plus PPR point per game ceiling because that's fantasy football sometimes. So definitely, if you guys enjoyed the video, leave us a like down below, subscribe to the channel if you're new. Let us know what you thought of the mock draft, who was going too high, who was going too low, who didn't we talk about maybe that you think we should talk about. Danny, if you want to give some honorable mentions, you can go ahead.
That's exactly what I was going to provide. I know a lot of you are probably going to the comments and being like, where's Derrick Henry? Where's Joe Mixon, Nick Chubb, guys like that. And they're Dalvin Cook. They're close to the cut. Don't get me wrong, but a lot of them, especially, Derrick Henry and Dalvin Cook in particular, there's workload, there's age concerns. I mean, Corey, you can basically cite the study that you've done in terms of the running back age and touch apex. Every year removed, I don't care if they keep it up every single year. Like, it's still going to be a heightened concern as they get older, as the touches accumulate. And as a result, I mean, we just have a fucking great first 2 rounds this year to the point where I'm not taking that unneeded risk.
Yeah, exactly. And I mean, a lot of people are probably going to adopt the draft strategy next year to take, if they have the 103, they're going to take Jamar Chase or Tyreek Hill. And then on the 1-2 turn, they're going to take, if somebody falls like an Amon-Ra St. Brown, they're going to take those 2 guys and just be like, oh, well, last year it worked. We can get our running backs in the 8th, 9th, 10th round. Just look for this year's Ramondre Stevenson, Josh Jacobs, and Jamal Williams, and we'll be just fine. And that could also cause some kind of issues like an overcorrection, just chasing last year's breakouts and last year's studs. But at the same time, I do think the market is going to shift a lot more in favor of what me and Danny kind of preached this entire offseason versus I don't think we're going to get the exact opposite reaction where everybody's just drafting running backs high again. I think people are going to learn a little bit, and at the very least, it's going to be a little bit more balanced than it was last year and years prior. So definitely an interesting thing to talk about. It's way too early. Like we said, 2023 fantasy football mock draft. We're going to be doing a million of these until the actual 2023 season starts. The rest of this week, if you guys want to stay tuned to the channel, we're going to talk reflective content. We're going to break down pretty much everything that we learned from each team in the NFC and the AFC. Me and Danny will split that up. Talk about what we expected going into the season out of those teams. Who were the breakouts? Who were the sleepers? Who were the busts that we were talking about? Were we right about them? What can we learn? Are there lessons to take away? All that good stuff. And then we'll break down our final, lessons learned video that we do every year and kind of recap what we talked about last year. So definitely stay tuned for that. Stay tuned for everything we got going on over on Patreon. Now that the season's over, a lot of Dynasty content over there. But with that being said, peace out. We'll talk to you soon.
Why you need the money?